all these little things really helped prepare me for a spouse, as silly as it is. First thing that I did was make sure that this is what I wanted. Second thing that I did was write down all the things that I wanted in a husband and a spouse. He loves God. He's, tall but not too tall. He's attractive but not attractive enough where other girls like will want him. You know what I mean? Like I had a huge list. So make your list. So that's what I did. I made a list. Forgive yourself for whatever happened in your relationships. If you've had relationships, forgive yourself for what you did. Forgive yourself for what you let your partner do. Forgive yourself. I had so many days when I was single and I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment. I would go to work. I would eat by myself. I would cry in the shower. I would go to sleep. And then I wake up and do it all over again, right? I go to work, come home, empty place, cry in the shower. And then, but I hit a point where I was just like, there were so many people who were bringing up God to me in some degree. So I cracked open that Bible, right? I went to Bible study. Spiritually, you need to make sure that you're healthy spiritually. There are all these facets of you that you need to make sure that are healthy because they will be amplified when you are married. And I just want to say that first. So I think this is a very important step. Some people roll their eyes at this step, but really think about how you are spiritually right now, how you want to be later too, because God is really going to guide you in this process too. Because I know when I did it by myself, it was not working, and that's just my testimony. When I was doing it by myself, it was not working. I really needed the guidance and direction and discernment of God, right? The next thing I did was a fast, which I mentioned in another video. It was this video over here, and I'll link it at the end of this video if you haven't seen it, right? So I did the fast. Finances are a huge thing because I wanted to be able, at the time, go to school, pay for my apartment, this and the other. So I really wanted to make sure that my finances were, if not flourishing, stable, right? So I ended up working like 2 or 3 jobs, right? And then slowly dropping them as I went. It's only temporary. It was only temporary. So I got my finances together. The next thing is I tried to have those difficult conversations with my father. I've mentioned it in the book that I wrote, which I'll leave in the description box, but I knew there was some things that I needed to work out with him because you know how they always say father issues, blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, let me try to heal that in case that's what's holding me back from finding my husband. So, along with, you know, nourishing my spiritual health, making sure my finances were together, making sure that I was in good spirits and putting myself out there. Sometimes you have your hopes up and you go out and you're like, oh, I'm going to be alone forever. Okay. And that goes on to the next thing I want to say. Be careful what you're saying. I kept saying, oh, it's not going to work for me. It's not going to work for me. I see these couple walking around. I'd be sad, like, oh, Lord, why isn't it happening for me? What am I doing? Why have you forsaken I? Like saying things that was not in alignment with what I wanted. And I know it's easier to say now because I'm on the other side, but sis, I was on that side too. Okay. And I'm trying to tell you, be careful what you're saying. You want to just feel the good feeling of having a husband. One of the things that helped me feel better about that was, and this is not for you to do, I'm just sharing what I did, was to put a ring on my opposite hand. So my wedding band is on my wedding finger, right? But for the longest time, I would wear a band on this finger and I would just imagine it being on this finger, because in the Haitian culture, they say you shouldn't wear a wedding ring if you are unmarried on your wedding finger. It's like a wise tale, but honestly, I believed it because my mom would say, don't do that, right? So anyways, I would just imagine, I would put a little band here and I would, not like this. It was like I don't even know what it looked like, but I would just picture it being on this hand, like being married, like not saying it, because I felt like when I said it, it felt forced, it felt fake, it whatever. So I personally tried not to say things, and I just tried to feel them. And I know that sounds weird, and I know that sounds weird, but just feel like, oh, this would be nice. Like this would be nice. This would be nice, you know. And try to say less of it's not going to happen for me. How come he's not here? What am I doing wrong? Blah 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 blah. How come I'm cute? I'm blah, you know, trying not to feed into that. So that really helped me a lot, and talking to my father. And when I spoke to my father, he was encouraging too, like, you're going to get married. I already know. And I was like, you don't know. You don't know. He's like, I already know. Don't worry. And I didn't really believe him, except for the last part. I'm like, don't worry. I'm like, okay, I shouldn't worry about this. I shouldn't. And so that helped me to be less desperate. Like, stop worrying about it. Stop, like, you know, forcing it, you know? And so as I'm doing all these things, I'm on the apps, and, uh, you know, I'm seeing certain cultures, because I was like, well, maybe I need to go outside of my race. I was like, maybe I should just open up my dating pool, so to speak. And that was interesting. But in the end, I really think that what you're thinking, what you're saying to yourself, your upbringing, the things that you need to change, and your spirituality, that is the big one for me. Spirituality was a huge one for me. Because, like, I'm a mother now, and my kids are just like, we'll be walking, and they'll be like, la, 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 la. And I'm like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that, right? And they're like, why? Why? This is fine, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I foresaw that there was a guy coming out of a parking spot. I foresaw, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like as a child of God, you have to let your father kind of lead you, so to speak. The hard part, the hard part about preparing for your spouse, preparing for your husband, because you don't know when it's going to happen. And I think that's the most, it really can test your patience. It will really test your patience, because you don't know when it's going to happen. But I'm going to tell you, legit, I got to a point where I don't even care when it's going to happen. I'm going to clear up all these things. I'm going to clear out my closet. I'm going to make room for this person, physically, spiritually, mentally, everything, so that God can know that I'm serious. I'm going to pray. I'm going to get into my Bible. I'm going to humble myself and heal, right? And also get rid of situationships that just wasn't working. Get the answers that I needed to those situationships that weren't working, so to speak. You know, there's always, not always, but for some of us, there is this thing where you need clarity and closure. And honestly, you don't need it. I've been reading a lot about love lately. I was reading a book, actually, all about love. And I'm not suggesting it yet because I'm not finished, because I'm not sure if I'm not completely sold if I like it. But I think it just reminded me of all the things that I was reading, of all the things that I was watching. I was watching and reading things that was encouraging me. Watch, read things that are encouraging you, people's testimonies, people's engagement stories. Oh my gosh, I don't know how many engagement videos I watched. People explaining their engagement, and I legit was like, okay, I want it to be like this. I want it to be like that. I want it to be like this. And I I just was sobbing. One, because I thought it was so beautiful. Two, because I was so sad because it wasn't me at that moment. But looking back, it's all It was all a plan. So if you want me to share my engagement story, I can in another video. Just let me know down below. But let me know how you're feeling about this. I know it's hard. It's really hard. It's at the time of filming this, it's 2025. You know, it doesn't even matter how old you are. I feel like if you do, I feel like it doesn't even matter how old you are. If you really change, girl, have you ever been on like your regular route and then there's a detour and you're like, oh my goodness, this is gonna throw everything off. I need to get to where I need to get to, you know? And as you're going through that detour, you realize, oh wow, I didn't know about this area. Oh wow, this is actually nice. Oh wow, this is I might take this route next time. You know, sometimes we just have to, go a different route. I love to tell this story. Like, you know how like when you were young, you would take if you were in, if you know how like if you were like a city girl and you were young, you would take the bus route. For me, that's how I learned about parts of where I'm from. And then when this is before, was GPS around? Oh my God, I'm telling you my age. I don't think GPS was around. And if it was expensive. But actually, it was around. Magellan, or whatever. Anyways, you take those routes and you're like, oh, wow, this is nice. You take those, when someone shows you a different way, when you change up your route, you're like, oh, snap, this is a shortcut. I could have taken this. You mean to tell me if I cut through this place, I would have gotten it? And that's what I feel like this will help you in, you know, attracting your spouse to you. A bonus though. Another thing that I was doing. This is gonna sound so cheesy. I was really working on my recipe game. Okay. I was like, I'm gonna have to feed this man. Okay. So what I would do is I would make my recipes, write it down. I still do to this day, actually. I would write it down. I'm like, yeah, because in my mind, one of the things is I need to feed this man one, and it needs to be good so he can keep coming back. Two. That was just how I was thinking. So I would make recipes, and this is gonna sound so sad. Okay, before you go, this is gonna sound so sad. What I would do is I would make those recipes. I would sit at my table. Remember, I told you I lived by myself at the time. I sat at my table. I had my little food, it was good. I also had a plate on the other side. And I'm laughing now because it seems so sad. Because, like, who does that? Like, what? But I was so in faith that I didn't care, right? I would have a plate for my husband. Mind you, I didn't have anybody. Nobody was over there. Nobody was sitting across me. I would have a plate for him right there. And I would sit. Real delulu stuff, right? But I feel like the delulu stuff in private, mind you, helped encourage me. But I would eat sometimes. I'm like, oh, did you like it? Like, oh, yeah, I can make it again, right? I would do things like that, just talk to myself. And then I would finish my food, and then I would take, the other plate, and I would just put it in a container. And it sounds so sad right now. But honestly, I feel like all these little things really helped prepare me for a spouse, as silly as it is. I mean, if you think it's silly, just let me know down below. I don't blame you, but yeah. Sis, I want you to know that what you're saying to yourself is a big deal. So please, 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 please